Caution. The AJ and Quill Show contains D&D content and is intended for a D&D audience. And, besides that, they're really weird. Hi everyone, welcome to Meta Adjacent, your stop for all things meta in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. I'm Professor AJ, and with me as always is my fearless companion, Quill the Dragon. Say hi, Quill.
Greetings, puny humans. Prepare to absorb the knowledge Quill will dispense with his mighty jaws. So, what are we covering today?
Well, today we're actually in for a treat. 2020 sparked a conversation inside the Dungeons & Dragons community about disability and ableism that we think is going to be one of the major talking points in the coming years.
We have seen some amazing strides towards inclusiveness, and today, in studio, we're doing a review of Limitless Heroics.
Limitless Heroics is a 5e add-on for including characters inside your Dungeons & Dragons campaign who have disabilities, mental illness, or neurodivergence. And it's all 5e compatible.
And here in studio today with us is Dale Critchley, here to discuss the upcoming book out on Kickstarter.
Right, so awesome. Welcome to the studio, Dale. Great to have you here.
Greetings, puny human named Dale. Quill demands you introduce yourself and name your favorite beverage.
Well, I'm Dale Critchley. I am the owner, lead writer, and chief tea drinker at Wyrmworks Publishing. And so our big project right now is Limitless Heroics. And it is all about including disabled and neurodiverse and mentally ill characters in your 5th edition D&D campaign.
There's like over 450 different symptoms to put into your game that are covered in this book. How did you put it all together? How did you get that going?
Right. So what we did is we went through and compiled a list of just about every symptom of any of those things in the world. And then added, because this is in a fantasy setting, thought, okay, so what other kinds of symptoms would people experience in a fantasy world in addition to that, that even though it's a fantasy kind of experience, that it's analogous to some real world things. And so it just kind of gives it a little fantasy flavor that makes it fit nicely into a fantasy game. And so each of those symptoms has different degrees of severity because disabilities and the like are not all or nothing. And so it might be something that's very mild, it might be something that's very severe, and you can either roll on a table or you can choose that depending on your thoughts on putting your character together. It's designed so that you can take these concepts and implement them in their game, but it also mentions, you know what, this is going to make your game a little more complicated, all right? Absolutely. Just like these experiences in real life make things a little more complicated. One of the big decisions that I had to make was, people said this doesn't feel very 5th edition, is that you have +1 through +4 or -1 through -4 on rolls, whereas usually it's just advantage or disadvantage.
And we both like what you did there, because even persons with the same disability can experience quite a varied spectrum of symptoms.
Right, and if you want to get a little meta, advantage and disadvantage is roughly equivalent to about a + or -5 on a die roll.
That's about 20 to 25% of your rolls.
Which is pretty significant, but not every disability is all or nothing. There's a varying scale and a spectrum on which people can experience these symptoms.
Maybe your symptom is a +1 or a +3.
Or maybe the symptoms vary every day and you're taking kind of the average. Some days it's a 1, some days it's a 5, but on average it's a 3.
So it's nice to have those levels in place for people to be able to fine-tune how they wish to represent their symptoms.
And it also has different durations. And so, sometimes people have experiences where things kind of come and go. Maybe it's in remission for a while, or maybe it's like some days are bad and some days are good. Or maybe it's just all the time. And so it's designed so that you can either, again, roll or choose that. And so you get this vast variety of experiences.
Smart. So you can custom tailor a bespoke disability by picking out the exact symptoms you want to represent in your character.
Or if you if you just say, I don't know, but I want to learn. And so I'm just going to randomly roll some stuff together. Maybe that collection of symptoms never occurs in the real world, right? But it might in a fantasy world. And so it's not this isn't a medical book. A lot of changes had to be made just to adjust for game mechanics and things like that.
Right, because it's not meant to be used as a medical journal.
Right, it's meant to be a way to introduce a disability into a game system.
Right. Yeah. So it's, this is like don't WebMD with this book. All right. Yeah. But at the same time, this is more about, this is my experience, or I know somebody, with this experience, and I want to learn more about what life is like for them, or just to understand them a little better.
Which is great, because Dungeons and Dragons and tabletop role-playing games are for everyone.
Everyone wants to be seen and feel represented.
I mean, as I was putting this together, it was amazing how many of those symptoms are describe my experiences. And I don't identify as disabled, right? But some of it is just I'm getting old.
Getting old, you and me both.
What are you talking about? I'm 500 years young. I'm basically a teen heartthrob.
Or there's certain things that I've just kind of dealt with throughout my life that there are, for the most part, pretty mild, right? But they have caused problems in my life. They've caused inconveniences. They've caused it's affected my careers and things like that that I've had to deal with this stuff.
So even a non-disabled person could use this book to say better represent their own experience if they wanted to.
And we also made a point of including a whole bunch of information about how to do it respectfully.
And there was actually a great section in there that covered ableist tropes that were common in storytelling and how to avoid them.
I mean, I would hope that nobody would spend the money on this book and use it to mock people.
Right, because everybody should feel free to be able to explore their own ableness and expand their understanding, especially when it's done in a safe and respectful environment.
But also that ties into part of the process of putting this book together.
Yes, let's talk about that. Because you included a lot of disabled people, writers, content reviewers for advice and insight based on their own experiences when you were writing this book.
Which is awesome, by the way. How did that go?
So as soon as I put this together, I knew that there's no way that I could describe everyone else's experiences. Right. And so what I did is I just started reaching out on social media, talking to people and things like that. And said, hey, I'm putting this book together. Would you be willing to talk to me about your experiences? And, would you be willing to take a look at these mechanics that I'm putting together based on your experiences and give me your feedback on it? And people were really excited about it. And so I had just a whole bunch of people. Honestly, I lost count because I've got a list that will be in the back of the book of the people that really, put a lot of effort into it. And there are also other times where not only did I talk to people to have that experience, I also talked to people, therapists and people like that work with people with those experiences and get their feedback too. And in fact, we've got two amazing content or sensitivity raters that are looking over this, that are looking at it from different angles. One works in the disability community, and the other one is a therapist. And so they both are very highly qualified, but have different sets of qualifications, so they can look at it from different angles. And that's an addition. And they also are disabled. And so everyone that we have hired for this, writers, editors, artists, everyone that I've hired is disabled, neurodivergent, or mentally ill, or a combination of those. But then there were a lot of other people that somebody mentioned that they have autism or ADHD or something like that, and they just mentioned it on Twitter, and I said, hey, I noticed that you said something about that. I'm writing this. Hey, what do you think of this? And do you feel like this represents you? And a lot of people just looked at it and said, yeah, exactly. In fact, one of the artists that I have came on because he mentioned that he had ADHD. I showed him that, and he's like, "Can I be part of this project?" and so I hired him as an artist.
Right, which is so cool because you don't really see a lot of this represented in, say, Hollywood or a lot of bigger businesses.
I have to say, not every symptom was I able to get feedback on.
Right, of course, because how could you cover every single symptom? The whole book would be like 6,000 pages long.
All right, some of the symptoms, for one, I mean, there's the fantasy symptoms. All right, for two, some of them are extremely rare.
Yeah.
All right, I mean, there's some symptoms in there where there's literally one historical example of it, and that person's been dead for decades.
Yeah.
All right,
Absolutely.
there's no way I could contact them, and so there are symptoms in there that. So in those cases, what I did is I read everything I could find on it. I read, scientific journals and just like whatever I could find on it to get as much information as possible. I actually did that with all of them, but I really, wherever I could, I talked to people to get their actual experiences.
So what inspired you to make this book? Why did you want to make it in the first place?
Oh, yeah. I mean, here's the thing. When you look at, you mentioned Hollywood, all right? You look at the different, the way that over time you compare TV and movies from 20 years ago to today, and you see that Hollywood has gotten much more inclusive, all right?
Yeah, they have.
There's still a long way to go. Talk to Asian actors, and they'll tell you. All right, and that's just one example. But then when you look at just ableism as in a very broad category, wow, Hollywood's got a long way to go. They've made some strides. You watch stuff from 20 years ago, some of the jokes and things like that would not fly today. All right, but as far as representation, there's very little of it. So that was part of the motivation of this book is that I can't personally do a whole lot to influence Hollywood, all right, but my sphere is tabletop role-playing games. And so, and which is also why I chose 5th edition as the sort of platform for this. Fate already has, if you haven't checked out the Fate Accessibility Toolkit, it's amazing.
Yeah, they are. I like them. They do a really good job.
And but I want to be able to reach a broader audience and help more people with this and just to grow this understanding, because I really believe that if people grow in their sensitivity to this, all right, that's going to expand not just in how things are represented in their game. All right, they're going to learn in game, and then they're going to take what they've learned in game, and it's going to change how they interact with people in the real world.
Exactly. I find that the reason a lot of people end up being uncomfortable around disabled people is just unfamiliarity. A lot of people just aren't sure how to act, and they want to do the right thing, but they're so afraid of doing the wrong thing that they end up becoming afraid of disabled people.
And like Yoda said, fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, and hate to suffering.
And I remember reading in a study that people who engaged in tabletop role-playing games and tabletop games like Dungeons & Dragons in general were nicer and had better morals because they tended to continue to exemplify those heroic qualities of their characters in the real world when engaging with actual people.
So part of the motivation for this is, hey, give your players a chance to interact with disabled characters, right? So that they recognize this isn't scary, right? They're just people, right? Another thing that we're doing with it is addressing, you already mentioned, different tropes to avoid, but we're also addressing different myths.
And it's really good to try to dispel a lot of those myths.
Right. And so, for example, blindness, when people hear blind, they assume, you can't see anything.
Yeah.
All right. And, but the blindness is a spectrum. Right. And And so there's lots of people that can see, maybe it's just like everything's really blurry, or things are, you can see kind of light and dark, or like there's a range, right? And so we have that included so that people can understand the difference, right? Or wheelchair users, just because you have a wheelchair user or you're a wheelchair user doesn't mean that your legs are paralyzed.
Absolutely.
Right. All right. There's plenty of ambulatory wheelchair users that they can get up and walk for very short periods of time, or maybe it's really painful, but they can do it. And so, and different people use wheelchairs for different reasons too. For some people, it's a weakness in the muscles. For other people, it's pain or stiffness in the joints, or all kinds of different things. And so, we want to help people understand those distinctions. And so that is all. Like, even if you don't actually use the mechanics in the game, if you're just thinking about, okay, I want to include an NPC, that has this condition or experience or whatever, that they can read the entry and see, sort of avoid this, or whatever. Okay, with blindness, another common myth is that when people are blind, all of their other senses are heightened. Like, you become Daredevil.
Right, the Daredevil myth.
Okay, and no, that's not the way it works. But oftentimes, people do learn to use their other senses better. Yeah. Whereas sighted people typically, like, your primary, the one sense that you rely on more than any other is sight, and then you sort of use your other senses to kind of fill in the blanks. Mm-hmm. So this book was designed to take those sorts of things into consideration, and to teach people about these these different myths, and how things actually work, the best we could in using the system. And so hopefully, people better understand, so that when they encounter people in real life, they don't jump to all kinds of weird conclusions.
And giving people a little bit of knowledge so that they don't jump to those conclusions automatically is a great way to combat ableism.
Ignorance dies in the presence of knowledge.
Now, perhaps the most important question we're going to be able to ask you here tonight, Dale, is...
I know. Is it edible? Can you read this book?
Well, I suppose it depends. If you're using the PDF form, probably not.
He doesn't sound very sure.
The paper form, I don't recommend it, but I suppose in theory, you could.
So where can everybody find this, and where can they find you?
All right, so the easiest thing to do to find it is just go to inclusiverpg.com. All right, that will redirect you to the Kickstarter, or if you happen to catch this before that, it'll redirect you to the page on our website, or if you happen to come across this after the Kickstarter is all done, it'll redirect you to where you can get more information, or sign up to get a copy available after the fact, or just get more information in general. We're going to have a bunch of extra things on our website and stuff like that, but if you just go to inclusiverpg.com, that will get you to all of that stuff.
Awesome. Thanks, Dale. It was so great to get to talk to you about this.
And thanks for your time.
All right, thanks, you too.
Now, we love seeing that people are striving to make new and intriguing disabled content for the games that we love. And for our final thought, let's go to Quill.
For our final thought, you have to ask the question, is content like this relevant? Is it important? The answer is yes. So long as you have people wanting to include and play disabled characters inside their game, then yes, this is very important. All people should be able to explore their own ableness inside a safe, enjoyable, and inclusive environment. Especially when they can be encouraged to do so outside of ableist tropes that tend to recur inside storytelling in media that can dehumanize or even objectify disabled people. Remember, D&D is for everyone.
Well said, Quill. Oh, and a special shout out to Dale Critchley for spending his time with us today.
I appreciate it.
Thanks for answering all our silly questions.
All right. Thanks. You too.
All right, have a good one.
Bye.
All right. Bye.
For next time, try to love each other just a little bit more. Try to understand each other a little bit more. And we'll see you next time.